So we may suddenly get a flash of inspiration. And if we take time to stop and say, okay, I got this inspiration. Why did I get this now? Say, oh, you know what? Well, every time I'm singing Yesterday by the Beatles in the shower, I get an inspiration. Well, hey, now we've learned something. Now we understand that our brain receives things when we take certain actions. So the brain, as we talk about Think and Grow Rich, and the very first word in that title is think, and think is talking about the brain. The brain is the control center of everything else going on. And understanding, I guess, how the brain works or that the brain does work is the focus of this. Taking control of our conscious mind. So the brain is a combination of conscious and subconscious. And we just talked in our earlier seminars or lessons here about the subconscious mind and how that works. But the more we understand the subconscious and bring that forward into the conscious of our mind, the more we are aware of what's going on and able to take control of that. There's an old story of a man who went to the doctor saying that every time he drank hot chocolate, he had the stabbing pain in his eye. So the doctor looked at him and said, well, take the spoon out of the cup first. Still the example, but how often do we have things that happen to us that we just don't understand why? Like, oh, this is always happening to me. I always have this problem. This, whenever these ununderstandable, experiences are going on in our mind because we don't take time to consciously look and see what's happening. The brain is continually transmitting and receiving signals. And some of those are on the forefront, the conscious of our mind. Some of those are buried in the subconscious, deeper down. But the brain works in a way that we can understand these things if we take the time. And the first thing that we need to do is take time to be introspective. Look inside. Look for why things are happening. Examine what's happening. Simply taking that time. Now, Think and Grow Rich goes through 13 steps. And each of those are things that we consciously have to look at in our life. Now, we're probably doing all of these things to some extent in our lives without realizing it. But the key of Think and Grow Rich, the secret of the magic of it, is to take those things and bring them to the forefront. Focus on them, examine them, and understand them. So again, those 13 steps, desire, faith, autosuggestion, specialized knowledge, imagination, organized planning, decision, persistence, mastermind, transmutation, the subconscious mind, and then, of course, this week, the brain and the sixth sense. Each of those are things that go on in our brain, in our lives, without necessarily understanding or knowing that it's even happening. But if we look at each of those and take time to introspect, starting with desire, what is our real desire? What do we really want in life? What is it that really is at our core moving us forward? And taking time to examine them. And then doing that with each of these steps and saying, what is that step meaning to me? Taking that time to focus on and understanding what's deeper in our mind and what's on the surface and bringing those together in the brain. Because the brain, again, is that combination of the conscious and the subconscious. And as we start to do that, as we examine it, we begin to realize that we are continually transmitting and receiving things in our brain. Now, I'm going to reverse those a bit and talk about receiving first. Now, this gets a little on the woo-woo side of things about what we're receiving into our brain. But I'm more of a science guy, and I think that there's truth behind this that's explained more simply. But we all, at some time in our life, get these flashes of inspiration. Suddenly, something comes into our mind. And whether it comes from the universe out there, from a higher power, or from something buried in our subconscious that just come to the forefront, really is irrelevant. What matters is how we understand that these things are happening. So we may suddenly get a flash of inspiration, And if we take time to stop and say, okay, I got this inspiration. Why did I get this now? Say, oh, you know what? Well, every time I'm singing Yesterday by the Beatles in the shower, I get an inspiration. Well, hey, now we've learned something. Now we understand that our brain receives things when we take certain actions. Or maybe it's when I sit in meditation, I receive things. Or maybe it's when I start whittling wood, I receive things. But the key is to understand when you start to receive and look at those things, introspect about why I received them at those times. And as we do that, we can take those subconscious things and bring them to the forefront and put ourselves in the frame of mind to be able to receive more often. And that's the key. If we want to be successful, we've got to really tap into our brain beyond just what we always know and think and do. The old saying that, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. If we want to be successful, if we're not successful now, we want to become successful, we can't achieve that by doing the same thing. And it all begins with the brain and how we think and understanding how our individual brains work. How do we receive inspiration? How do we receive information around us? And as we receive that, we also are going to be transmitting to other people around us. Now, a big part of Think and Grow Rich is we're not going to do it all on our own. And I know we're talking about the brain here, and that's something within ourselves, but it's something we need to connect with other people. And we need to be able to transmit our intentions, our thoughts, our desires, our needs to people around us, more than just with words. Now, a simple example of that, my wife is a great observer of people, and we'll sometimes go to church and she'll point out, oh, that person is really rich. And it's not because of how they dress or they're wearing a certain type of clothing or certain brand of purse or watch or something, but it's their mannerisms, the way they act. They transmit a certain amount of ideas about themselves. And I'm not saying this in a negative way that they're just trying to boast or something, but each of us transmit to people around us the thoughts and ideas in our brain to an extent. If we want to be successful, if we want to be rich in our lives, whether it's money or friends or feelings or accomplishments, we transmit those things. And as we learn to solidify those thoughts in our mind, we become those things through the thoughts and actions we take. And as we become that, we transmit that to other people. And that allows us to connect with other people. Now, whether that's a mystical sixth sense woo that's coming out to connect with another person, or whether it's the subconscious understanding that that person is looking for the same things I am. That person has achieved where I want. And we're attracted to those people in that way. And those people are attracted to us. And I believe that's the transmitting and receiving that the brain does on a level below our consciousness. Whether it's a telepathy, as Napoleon Hill talks about in Think and Grow Rich, whether it's just the very subtle changes in demeanor and eye contact and all of these things, is irrelevant, really. The fact is that it does that. And as we learn about that, as we study it, as we practice it, we can become more of that. And by becoming that, we get into maybe what Napoleon Hill talks about as the sixth sense, a mystical energy connecting people and helping us learn things and understand things, or whether it's putting our brain into a certain state where we're receptive to these things, where we can see these subconscious things, these minute character traits and sights and smells and tastes and all of our senses working together to interpret what's going on around us and to send those same interpretations to other people. And understanding that these things are happening is something that we can recognize in our lives. And as we begin to recognize it, we can exercise that more. So I came up with a little slogan for that. As we recognize it, we can exercise it. And as we exercise it, we will recognize it. That might be a tongue twister if I say it 3 times fast. But as we understand what's happening when the brain is working, it's wonderful to understand the deeper workings of it. But what really matters is the result. When we see that we are connecting with people, when we see that we are receiving inspiration, when we see that we are understanding, getting flashes of understanding, getting sudden motivation, when we have these feelings, we recognize them, take time to think about them, introspect about them. And as we do that, we can learn to exercise those same things that are causing it, so that those feelings happen more often and stronger. They're recognized more quickly. Exercising the brain, just like exercising our body. If you want to be a great baseball player, you do what my father did. He screwed a screw into a baseball, tied it to a string on a stick, and practiced hitting it. The more he did that, the better he got at hitting. His hand-eye coordination became better. He could see where the ball was going to come. He understood how he was hitting it. The brain works the same way. The more we exercise it and examine and recognize what's happening, and we tweak that so that we go deeper into understanding how we receive inspiration, how our brain works, how it motivates us. All of that's going to move us forward. It's not necessarily a deep mystical that we'll never understand, but it is a very physical exercising and recognizing that. So I want to close out my thoughts here with just those 3 steps. First, take time to introspect what you're doing in life. Introspect how your brain is working, your motivations, your inspiration, all of these things. And then as you incorporate these steps in Think and Grow Rich, you will start to become that person that you want to be. And allow yourself to become them. Don't be caught up in imposter syndrome and those things. We're all learning and growing and becoming. Allow yourself to become. And then finally, exercise and recognize how your brain is working and take the time to do that. So I'll close out with those 3 points: to introspect, become, and to exercise and recognize. And finish out that idea of Think and Grow Rich. As we've gone through these steps, continue to go back and say, am I doing that? Am I exercising each of those steps? Am I introspecting on those steps? And as we do this over and over again, we become stronger, faster, better, and become that person that we want to be, to think and grow rich, and rich in our lives, or whichever way we're looking for in our lives.